Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you my method of foundation paper piecing. My name is Clare Rowley and I have also created this wonderful pattern for you to print out. It is completely free. Just click on the description below and you will find the link to it, and when you click on it you'll discover it is a PDF file. Very simple. You just print it out using your laser or inkjet printer. You will also discover that there are links for all of the products that you will see me use in this lesson. I hope you enjoy learning my technique. Once you print out the pattern, then go ahead and cut your pattern piece down, leaving this 1/4 inch section here because this shows you the boundaries of your actual pattern. I've also included the pattern in a color option should you want to print yours out in color. And you can also just write the color of the fabric down in each one so that you know which fabric that you're doing to save on ink. Now, one of the neat things about paper piecing is that you can just lay a piece of fabric down and see if it's going to fit the area. And some people teach you to sew it this way, to just cut as you go, but I find it more efficient to cut all of my pieces out ahead of time. Not exactly fitting, but at least somewhat fitting. And you can see it's kind of difficult for me to see the lines here, which is why I'm using this wonderful light tablet, which has 3 different settings. And now I can really see those lines. I use my pattern to kind of draw a rough pattern, and then I lay that down on top of my fabric and draw again and cut out all of my pieces so that I don't have to cut them out later. So you can see they vary in size considerably, but what they all have in common is they're all bigger than the section that I'm going to sew it into. And since I'm going to make 4 of these, I cut out 4 times the amount of pieces for one pattern. That way I can make 4 blocks, which ultimately will be sewn together and create a 14-inch block. So you can see I've also numbered the actual pieces of material with the friction pin that irons away. This way I don't have to think when I go to do my pieces. But before we go ahead and use this as a pattern, I'm going to prepare the paper. And I do so by folding on each one of the lines so that this pattern becomes foldable and I don't have to worry about it while I'm putting my fabric, or while my fabric is on the actual pattern. Most of your tutorials are going to show you that you sew through the paper, but I prefer to not do that. To eliminate having to sew through the paper, take and you're going to press each one of these lines and make a crease in the paper. Our wooden pressers make this very simple. So I'm just kind of pushing against the edge of the ruler and this creates a crease. Do the same thing with the next one. And continue until you've got all of the lines that you would normally sew on folded. Notice that as I did this, I did not take these creases and go through the triangle here at the end. Just want to have a nice crisp edge on that as well. Now that our pattern piece is prepped and you can see the creases on there, I take this outside and spray adhesive onto the surface of the paper. This is the one that I choose to use. It is a 3M general purpose number 45, and this is a repositionable permanent spray adhesive. And what that means is that whatever you spray it onto, it becomes permanently stuck. And then you can put things on it and peel things off of it, making it fabulous for paper piecing, as you're going to see. We're going to be sewing piece number 2 to piece number 1, and we want a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so we overlap them, making sure by folding it back over that it's going to surpass the 1/4 inch mark below it. So these 2 pieces are right sides together now, extending out beyond a 1/4 inch past the line below it. And you can see here that it is going to pass the pattern on all sides. So this should be safe. And we go ahead then. And since pattern piece number 1 does not have any sticky to hold it in place, we pin it to the actual piece below it. And instead of actually sewing through the paper, we're going to fold back the paper and we're going to sew right along the edge, which is the equivalent of sewing through the line. So we're sewing right next to the line. And now that we have that fabric in position, I'm going to take a piece of paper and lay this piece of paper right along the edge of the fold on the paper that we're using as our pattern. I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. We lower our needle down so that it's right along the edge of the paper, then lower the foot. The Satinedge foot has this little nut, and you turn the nut and it moves the wire that's inside the zigzag opening. And what we want is that wire should just touch the sewing machine needle when the needle is down into the fabric. Then we will watch the front of the presser foot and make sure that the paper is always touching the white part of the guide. So we're in essence edge stitching right along, or stitching in a ditch along the edge of the paper. And what you're not aware of is that I'm really not holding or steering the fabric. Instead, I'm just pushing toward the fabric, I'm pushing my hand against the edge of the paper, and that keeps it up against the guide. So instead of having to watch with your eyesight, you push, and the foot does the guiding for you. Open it up and you can see that we have our seam allowance. Remove that straight pin and pull back, and we have our first 2 pieces put together. And then you press, and this is one of our wooden pressers. It allows you to press without turning on the iron. You can see I'm going beyond this section right here. And what I like to do is I like to press my seams open. The reason I do is because when we reach down here, we're going to have multiple layers. If we attempt free motion quilting along that area, we're at risk of breaking our sewing machine needle. Now we need to cut this down to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And with the Caterpillar Glow tablets, having a self-healing mat on top, we can just cut right on our light source. Now that I've trimmed that off, I'm going to go ahead and pull back, but not all the way. I want to make sure that the yellow piece stays adhered to the pattern so it doesn't shift. Pull back, pull out that blue piece, and now I'm going to press open my seams. A lot of people press their seams to one side or the other. I prefer to press mine open when we have lots of different rows coming together at a small section. It makes it much easier for the needle when you want to do free motion. And that is my plan, to do free motion quilting on my project. I do this little flip and push, and then we just go ahead and press it down. Lay the paper over the top of it, flip it over, and now you can set that seam. Isn't it nice how the paper holds that fabric in place so that it doesn't shift on you? If you want to double check to make sure you're on the line, you can fold back the fabric and see that you are right on that line. So you see, I did not need to sew through the paper to do an accurate seam allowance. And now we're ready to adhere our piece number 3, which I've already got numbered. I like to test it like this. You take and bring your 2 edges of your fabrics together, then fold back so that your fold is on that actual line. And if your piece is not covering that up, then you know that you're going to sew it wrong. So you just pull back a little bit. And now we can see that we are covering that. And go all the way down and make sure that it's going to exceed a 1/4 inch down here, and you know that you're good to go. Okay, now that I've done that, I'm going to actually cut this piece down to a 1/4 inch. This will speed up the process. So fold back the next line. And now we're going to go ahead and cut the yellow so that it is a 1/4 inch past the paper. By trimming that yellow piece down to a 1/4 inch before I sew the next piece, I know that I've already got my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to go ahead and pin. Remember, the piece on top is not held down by any adhesive. So that is why I'm using 1 pin, and we move it as we go. And 1 piece is always adhered, which keeps all of the fabric centered on the paper. And we fold back that piece, and once again, lay your other piece of paper on top to keep the sewing machine foot from sticking to the adhesive. And this may seem like it's time consuming, but it's a lot quicker than pulling the paper out later. Notice how I pull and then flip it and then pull. And what I'm trying to do is make sure that I pull the fabric so that it's flat. This is a great opportunity for you each time you sew a seam to make sure it is in fact lining up with the line beneath before you continue. Make sure that your seam allowance is coming down right on that line. And do it again on this side. You can see how having that adhesive on the back side of the paper comes in really handy in making sure that you maintain precision in your piecing. Another really nice thing about having the adhesive on the paper is the ruler can't slip on the paper, so you don't have to worry about your ruler slipping on you as you go. Now we're ready for P4, and we can kind of look and see that this is about where that cross line is, and this will make it a lot easier for me not to mess up here. I can read the 4, that means it's right side. This lines up with the line. Pin. Fold back. Lay your paper on. Take it to the machine. That one went in really nice. Now you continue that process on all of the rest, and I will do that with a little speed up on the video so you don't have to endure the entire process in real time. To make this easier to press open, I pressed to one side first, then flip the whole thing over and press to the other side. And then it stands up and allows me to drop the presser in between the two. And then I start folding over and pressing. And if I didn't have the camera in front of me making me lift my elbow up, I would have my hand down the entire time, saving my upper body from working so hard. And I wouldn't need to rub like this. So know that some things I have to do because the camera is right in front of me. One more piece to go. If I weren't pressing my seams open, I would have been done a while ago. So just remember, if you're not going to do free motion quilting, instead you're going to use the stitching in a ditch method, then there's no reason to spread your seams open. Each one of these seam allowances has been pressed open, so they're all vulnerable from falling apart. So what I'm going to do is go over each one and use a forward and reverse action on the sewing machine. So I'm going to go across the seam and then reverse to secure that seam and continue that all the way across. So each seam I cross, I go back and sew over it again. And this way, if this ever ends up on a bed, we don't have to worry about if somebody stretches the quilt that those seams fall apart. Still keeping the fabrics attached to the pattern because we're not done until we cut all the way around this square. And here we have all that bulk. This is the entire reason that I press my seams open. Because if these were all folded over, they would have a lot more bulk. Right as it is right now, they're laying much flatter than they would have if I had them flipping over. However, I can even make it flatter. So let's see, we'll press this. Flip it over. Press the opposite direction. Then open that up. And the back end of the presser is for crunching or smushing. And you just kind of smush and rub and smush and rub. And it allows you to flatten all that out so it's distributed more equally across. Then once again, lay that back down and press some more. Now we're ready to square off the entire square. And isn't it nice that we can see the pattern through and we don't have to look, make sure, then move it over to a cutting mat because the cutting mat is attached to the board. In case you didn't hear me say it before. And there you go. Now that we've squared it off, all we have to do is peel off the paper, which is still completely intact. And if it's not sticky enough to do your next quarter piece, then you simply take it outside and give it a little bit more of a spray, and it will be ready for your next piece. Now we're going to sew two together using our water-soluble stabilizer in a bottle, the liquid-based glue. Just do little dots, and this represents straight pins that you never have to use. And this is a really good way of making sure that you've got your seams lined up perfectly. And it prevents the fabric from stretching out as you sew. So after you do two, then go ahead and glue them together. Then you don't have to worry about remembering which one should pin to which one, because you've already done it after you've created two of your squares. Then you just drag your finger across real softly, and you can see how nicely we can put those together. All of your seams pressed open. Since we do not have the paper to help us do our seam allowance, so go ahead and put your 1/4 inch foot on, or if you have our Satinedge foot, take and place it underneath the presser foot, select a left needle position, bring the needle down so that it hovers over one of the lines on the measuring tape. Turn the nut, which moves the little wire inside the zigzag opening over, and you move it to the 1/4 inch mark. And now you can go ahead and be consistent with your seam allowances for completing your square. You take and place the guide and wire so that it sits right off the fabric's edge. And I have my presser handy because when we reach this opposing seam, we can hold it down with it, or you can use a little drop of the liquid base and put it right on all of your opposing seams, and that will keep them from flipping up as you approach. I start on and then I reverse off and then come back on again, keeping my eye right here, making sure the fabric's touching the white part of the guide. You see how that glue just held that right down for us. Keep your eye on the front of the foot. And just as I start on, and I will go off the edge and come back up, and that way the end is actually inside of the quilt instead of on the edge. It makes for a stronger seam. Open it up and see how we did. And as I've done with all of the seam allowances, I'm going to go ahead and press this seam also flat. And this is the beauty of paper piecing. You end up with beautiful points, equal measurements going across, and it's normally so difficult to achieve such accuracy, especially on curved seams. So I just repeat that with the other two and then sew them together for a complete square. I appreciate you all so much and hope that you feel you benefited from watching this video today. If you liked what you saw, please be sure to hit the like button. And if you've yet to subscribe to my channel, well, I sure hope you'll do so today. Thanks for watching.